Welcome back to Light the Fuse, and Charles, we are on our 101th episode. How you feeling about that, big boy?
Pretty good. Very happy to be here. Very happy that everybody seemed really excited about our 100th episode.
Yes. Was anyone as excited as us? Probably not, but they came damn close, and, that's really saying something.
Yeah. And hey, we're continuing the fun this week because it's the 20th anniversary of I-2. May 24th, 2000 is when Mission Impossible 2 hit theaters, and so we wanted to celebrate the 20th anniversary with something special this week, and I think we succeeded.
Yeah, I think so. This week we are talking to Ron Moore, who is one of the original writers who worked on Mission Impossible 2. And this is after the drafts that we recapped last year, but was really the beginning of what would eventually become the Mission Impossible 2 that we all know and love. So hearing his perspective is really interesting.
Yeah, so if you recall from our episode about Oliver Stone's Mission Impossible 2, for Oliver Stone, David Marconi came on, and then Michael Tolkin rewrote David Marconi. And then when Oliver Stone left the project, they basically threw it out and started from scratch. And that's when Ron Moore and his, at that time, writing partner, Brandon Braga, they joined the project and started working with crews before there was a director on board. And they were working up until production, and then Robert Towne came in, and as you'll hear, Ron will explain the whole story of how it all happened, but that's just some context of it. But we wanted to get somebody special from MI2, and so it's I think we were able to do that, and we're very, very happy to have Ron on the show. He's been a big name in the Star Trek universe for a long time.
Yes, he worked on Next Generation and I believe Deep Space Nine, and created the new Battlestar Galactica on Sci-Fi, which is hugely beloved. He's worked on Outlander. He's got a show on Apple TV Plus, Apple Plus TV, whatever it's called. And yeah, he is a visionary. He's a science fiction visionary and a huge talent. And we were so lucky to get to talk to him. And this is just the beginning of our Mission Impossible 2 retrospective. Do you want to tell everybody who we have next week?
Well, I think we've already teased it, in previous episodes, but maybe we can say it now that Mitchell Lieb, who was the producer of the album for MI2, and he got all those artists together to do the soundtrack, including Limp Bizkit, Metallica, and all this. Isn't it the only soundtrack Metallica's ever done?
Yes, until a forthcoming movie, which he breaks that news on our episode. So there's one other movie, and it's coming out, and it's a Disney movie that got pushed back because of the virus, but just to tease that. But yeah, he's the president of Walt Disney Records, which is, that's a pretty cool position to have. And he has amazing stories. I mean, it's basically a 2-part Mitchell Lieb monologue, and it is all the better for it. So we're very excited about that.
It's outstanding. It's really fun, and he's a really great storyteller, has a lot of energy, and we basically just listen, and you'll listen and laugh the whole time. It's wonderful. But and just to plug Ronald Moore's show that he has on Apple TV Plus, it's called For All Mankind, which I have not seen it yet. But if you have, I think I just actually bought a new laptop, a new MacBook, and they gave me a year free on Apple TV Plus, so I'll check it out now.
Okay, Mr. Moneybags, coronavirus isn't affecting you. Oh, way.
My computer
got a new computer.
My computer was very old, and it has been worn down by dealing with this podcast and all the giant files that we have. So it's not doing too well. The charger isn't really working anymore, so I had to upgrade and get a new computer. Yes.
Well, we're excited for your new computer, and we're excited to hear Kevin Blumenfeld's pretty much legally identical plot theme right now, and we'll be back afterwards to wrap things up. So, Ron, obviously, the first question is, were you a fan of the original show and the original movies before I guess it was just one movie at the time before you signed on for 2?
No, I love the original series. I mean, I used to watch it as a kid all the time. It was a staple. I think I saw it in syndication in the first run syndication in the 70s. So I didn't see it on its original air, and I didn't understand the different seasons as a kid, and the characters tended to come and go, but I loved it. I thought it was a super cool series, and I did like the first movie. I enjoyed it, and so when the opportunity came to do the second one, Brandon and I both just kind of jumped at it.
So when were you brought on exactly? Because there were a few scripts before you guys came aboard, right?
There was at least one. I'm not.
Okay.
There could have been more, but I was only aware of one. I mean, we were asked. It was right around the time of First Contact that Brandon and I were working on, or we had just completed working on it, I think. And Don Granger, who was an executive at Paramount, came in and had worked with us on the Star Trek films, came to Brandon and I and said, "Look, would you guys be interested in doing the next Mission Impossible?" To which we were like, "Oh my God, that'd be unbelievable." They said, "Well, there's a script. We're having some problems. It's not really working. So I want you to meet with Tom and his producing partner, Paula Wagner. They have offices on the lot. I'll arrange for you guys to go over there." And so he made some calls, and we went over first to read the script, is my memory. And I think it was like you had to go over and read the script at their offices, right? And you go in and they lock the door and you sit there and you read it. And then we made notes on it. And at some point I took that script with me because it ended up in the archives that I donated to the Film and TV Library at USC, and somebody was telling me they found it. I really don't have much of a memory of that original script, or the first script that I saw. I think it had something to do with like a Rupert Murdoch type character that was similar to like the villain in GoldenEye, that had some largish kind of information, just disinformation thing going. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it had sort of surveillance and, the character being surveilled through all kinds of security things all around the world. That's kind of all I remember about it. So Brad and I read the script. We didn't really think it worked. We were pitching ideas and this and that. And then we met with Tom and Paula, which was a thrill, which was fun. It was like, oh my God, Tom Cruise. And it was a good meeting. I don't remember us talking about the script per se. I think it turned out to be much more of a get to know you meeting. I think he asked us a lot of questions. There was a lot of chatting and laughing and just kind of getting to know each other. And then after that meeting, we got to where they wanted us to come onto the project, and they wanted to start over, and they wanted to throw out the old script and just start fresh.
What was Cruise a Star Trek guy?
I don't think so. I mean, I think he had seen it, like he knew what it was, and he knew what shows we worked on, but he wasn't. I don't think he was a Trekkie, but per se.
I assume this was after Oliver Stone. I mean, were you aware of Oliver Stone being on it before you? I mean, was there no director attached when you came on?
There was no director attached. I'm not even. I think we might. I think they said Oliver Stone had been involved. Now that you say that, but it wasn't current. I think it was definitely over. His involvement was over by the time we came on.
So what was your guys' pitch on how to make this more viable? And what do you remember what that initial
Not
meeting was
really. I
like?
mean, there were lots
Okay.
of structural issues, and it was probably. I mean, the biggest problem with that script was the villain. Like the villain just wasn't particularly scary, and I think the notion of an omnipresent surveillance state as the threat was very hard to wrap your head around, because it was just sort of everywhere he went, basically computers were watching him, or security cameras, and doors would close on him automatically. And, it was that kind of stuff that you had kind of seen in various science fiction contexts. And it just didn't have a central story that was really hooking you. So I don't even remember what our fixes were in that original meeting. But in a project, that story just kind of went away kind of quickly. So we never really talked about it again.
So you guys wrote an original script after that,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So what was that script like?
Well, that took a while. It was like, Brandon and I started going to Tom's house. Like literally, we went to his house every day for about 2 months, and we would go and hang out at Tom's house for the day, and he would come down, and we would do these story meetings in his living room / screening room. And it started from zero. It started from, well, what could this be? And what are the sort of, are there movies that we want to look to sort of give ourselves a format? And Tom at some point said, what about Notorious? And neither Brand and I had seen it. He's like, oh my God, we're going to watch Notorious. And he got the Laserdisc of Notorious and projected it in his screening room. We all sat there and watched it. It's a fantastic film. And so there were definitely elements, especially with the female lead, that we borrowed from Notorious. But I don't remember whose idea it was that it became about, a bioweapon. It was about a virus or a bioweapon kind of thing. Came up early in the conversations, just as we were looking for, MacGuffins and different scary things. And it kind of then became a question of, well, okay, let's assemble a plot that has that as the MacGuffin that everybody's after, and then we'll have certain elements of Notorious, will kind of be the romance part of it. And then Tom started, there were interests of his that we then just worked in. Like he said, I want to open at rock climbing. I want to be free climbing a rock, at the very beginning, because I'm into that. And we were like, okay, cool. So we wrote a sequence of him rock climbing to open the movie. And it went
Wow.
through a lot of different, we kept working on the story outline. The story outline went through a lot of different iterations. And then we started working on the script, and that's went through several iterations as well. Most of which I don't remember because it's been so long. I mean, if you had the time and wherewithal, you could go to the USC Film and TV Library and ask to see the material, because there's a box of all the scripts and stories that are there.
I actually did do that
Oh, you
last year.
did?
Yeah, so yeah, I'll be able to. I have a couple questions I'll have to ask you specifically about things,
Oh,
but
great.
please continue. Yeah.
Great. Okay. There was the thing that's the most memorable that I know that we didn't end up doing was there was a sequence where Tom is on the outside of the space shuttle during a launch. And it was like a whole launch sequence with him on the space shuttle for some reason I can't even begin to tell you. And we didn't do it obviously, but when I saw the latest one that he did in the trailer and he was on the outside of that airplane taking off, I was like, oh my God, he finally got a chance to do that.
So how long did you guys make it through production? Because obviously we know Town was brought in at some point. I don't know, because he was kind of Cruise's guy, I think, at that
Yeah,
stage,
he was.
right?
We've been told that he would come in. They were very upfront about it. They said,
Oh, okay.
Robert Town always comes in and does a pass for Tom at the end. And we were like, okay, that's just the world of feature writing is so different than television that it's just you take a feature assignment and you look behind you and there's like four guys lined up that they're going to hire one after the other after the other. They just cycle through writers in feature world, which is why I don't particularly care for it as much as I like TV. So we knew that. We got through the first draft, and then we did work with John Woo a little bit. Like he came on, met him, had a couple of meetings with him, which was amazing because I was a big fan of his. And at that point, I don't even remember how well known he was in the United States, to be honest, but it was a big name to us, to Brandon and I. And I had a moment. There was one moment where I was alone with him for like 10 minutes for some reason, and I got to ask him about the tea house sequence at the beginning of Hard Boiled, and he kind of lit up and he got a big smile on his face, and his English was still kind of rudimentary at that point, so it was a little bit of a belabored conversation, but he was talking about how they set it up and how long it took him to do that sequence, and that was cool. That was like one of the most fun moments I had on the whole project.
Wow.
At one point, there was I think it was in the trades that Tom Cruise, before they hired John Woo, he had actually met and sat down with Wong Kar-wai and had humored the idea of having him direct the movie. Were you aware of that, or any other directors that came before John Woo?
No, I don't think I don't remember him talking about director names with us. It was, he had just come off of working with Kubrick on Eyes Wide Shut. And so there was a lot of conversation about Kubrick, and we were still working with when Kubrick died, which was just like, whoa.
Wow.
But yeah, I don't remember him talking about other potential directors. My memory is that just one day he said, oh, it's going to be John Woo. We were like, oh, very cool.
Were there any stories about Kubrick that you remember?
Just, there was a really interesting set and he was so intense and focused, which Tom really liked. And it was just all about the work and it was just very meticulous and it was very like in depth and thoughtful. And just, he said it was he was just like coming out of this whole experience of being just sort of isolated with Kubrick and Nicole Kidman, who he's still married to at that point. And, coming back and it was just like, oh, I'm coming back. I've been in this like pressure cooker thing. And it's like so weird. And it's like coming up for air again.
Was the thought always to be more action oriented for the second movie, or did that change? Did it shift when John Woo came on?
It was always very action oriented, just from the get go. It was like we're doing it. It was even at that point. It was the second movie, but it was clear that the action was a big part of the franchise as far as Tom was concerned.
At one point, it says there's a note from Tom. It says we need the Magnificent Seven moment where we recruit the team. And then this is after he realizes the IMF has been infiltrated. There's only one man who can help, and that's Luther, who's in prison.
Right.
so there was like and I think there was a prison escape sequence that was in David Koepp's draft for the first movie. And there were some notes about maybe trying to incorporate this prison break sequence into MI2 and breaking Luther out of prison to have him help them. Do you remember this stuff?
Now that you say, I do remember that was talked about. I don't remember if we wrote a version of that or not, but we definitely, I do remember talking a lot about, trying to break Luther out of prison, how big of a sequence that would be. And we spent some time going down that road just in terms of where is he and how would this be different than in other prison break. There was a lot of discussion of other prison breakout movies and how would this be different.
Right. And there's a note from Paula Wagner that's really fascinating to me. I don't know if this jogs any memories. It says, I assume that there's a character named Gabriella in the early notes, and I assume that's an early version of what Naya, the Tandy Newton character, was. It says, were Ethan and Gabriella married at some point? Keep thinking Face Off. Implantation of chip is too sci-fi. Emotional undercurrent? Personal. Luther is a clone? Rooted in reality.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, that's we would get notes like that from Paula periodically. That you'd kind of go, "What? Luther's a clone? What's she talking about?" It's like the clip is the chip is too sci-fi. We're gonna get into like Luther's a clone. Yeah, I don't remember that going anywhere. I think that was just kind of a Paula random thoughts would suddenly appear.
Well, I think, that was dated, I think, pretty early in your process, and that might have been coming off of the David Marconi draft, which is in your archive, which, is for the Oliver Stone. That one really did go sci-fi. There was a lot of crazy, like, supercomputer stuff and the surveillance stuff that you talked about.
It was surveillance stuff, right? That was what it was about?
Yeah, there's, like, a whole sequence in the Denver airport where they're, like, tapping into all the different security cameras, and then, like, it goes even beyond just security. It's, like... I don't really fully remember, but it was a lot of it got pretty ridiculous with this supercomputer idea.
Yeah, that's kind of how my memory of it as well.
So it looks like in a couple of your early drafts, or at least outlines, Kittredge was returned for MI2, and there was another situation of whether or not you didn't know if you could trust Kittredge.
Yeah.
Do you remember having him in any of your drafts?
Yeah, definitely. And there was, and I think he went in and out of the conversation because Tom wasn't sure if he wanted to have the character continue in the movie franchises or not. He'd sometimes be like, I love him, he's a great character, and then other times he kind of steer away and say, no, I think we should just leave that character in the first one. So it kind of went in and out.
Right.
There was a lot of conversation about how to, in the second movie, how much continuity was there with the first one. How much was Magnificent Seven putting the whole team together? How much of it was just Luther? How much of it was trying to pick up some of the threads of the betrayal in the first one? How much of it was just letting it go completely and making the film franchise a little bit more episodic? And it was just him. You could just see every day he was kind of musing out loud about the different ways you could go and, what was the best route and what was good for the audience and, what was most fun. And, so there was a lot of that kind of starting and stopping with those characters from the first film.
But was the thought to always include Luther?
It seemed like Luther was always there. Like, I think he really liked the character and he was I think he was always in the story in some way.
At one point in a couple of drafts, I think he started as a different character name, but then, and it sounded like the character was described just like Willie from the old show, the Peter Lupus character. He's like a big, guy. And then you ended up, it looked like in a draft from June of 1998, then you even are straight up calling him Willie Armitage, which is the character from the old show. Do you remember this?
Yeah, because Brandon and I, as part of our, as part of the portfolio to do it, we just decided to do a deep dive on the original. And you couldn't actually you couldn't get the episodes. Like, I don't know why. Like, they weren't on VHS or whatever the format was at the time, and we didn't, for whatever, even though Paramount had the rights, they couldn't give us copies either. So it was like one of those stupid things where you couldn't watch them. But we bought like a Making of Mission Impossible compendium book that had all the episodes listed and all the characters, and it was great detail, and that became our kind of Bible. And little did we know that Tom didn't care at all about the original series and didn't give a shit about any of it. But as a result, we became familiar with those characters and those character names, and we were looking to sneak in, little pieces of the mythology here and there at first, and eventually we gave up because it was just kind of pointless. It didn't matter, and we knew it would all get tossed anyway, so we just kind of gave up on doing it.
Oh man, that's disappointing to hear that he wasn't into the show.
Yeah, he didn't dislike. He didn't diss it. He didn't say, "Oh, the old show sucked" or anything. He just wasn't that interested in connective tissue to the old show or paying homage to it. It was just like, yeah, I mean, we're past that. We're not doing that. And it was just doing its own thing. And Mission Impossible to him was less about that team of operatives than it really was about Ethan. It was really about his character and how that was going to work.
I mean, was that part of the decision too to make the movies more standalone?
Yeah, it was really about his character, and that's what the movies became.
And did you carry over into production? I mean, how long were you doing? It seemed like you did a lot of drafts in those.
Did a lot of drafts in those
6
few months,
so.
but no, we didn't go into production. Like I said, we were at the beginning of prep with John Woo, and then they eventually finished with us, and then brought it Robert Town, and he took it through from there.
It also seems like at one point, the Naya character, the Tandy Newton character, was actually part of the IMF.
Yeah, that was something we played with at one point.
And that they were maybe even married before, like it was going to be Ethan's ex-wife.
I think so. I don't. Yeah, that rings a bell. I know there was some. There were various permutations of Ethan's backstory coming into this one and setting up relationships and prior relationships, and there was a lot of just talk, and I don't remember how much of it got written down, but we went through a lot of variations on who Ethan was and then how much we should ever know about him. Some of it should just be mystery or things that we knew internally as writers, and then we were going to just parse out little bits of mystery of his backstory. Spent a lot of time talking about those things. It didn't really go anywhere. We didn't really play very much with. I think Tom ultimately was happier with Ethan just being a little bit more of the unknowable man.
Right.
Did you ask about Max, Charles?
Oh no, yeah, because Max was in the Oliver Stone movie. Was there ever thought of bringing Max back?
Which one's Max?
Max is the Vanessa Redgrave character from the first movie.
Oh, no, I don't think we did. I don't think I don't recall any touching on that character. No.
Yeah. Do you recall like how? I mean, when John Woo came on, did he shift the script in any significant way? Like when you met with him, and is there something that he wanted specifically for this movie?
Not at that point. When he came on, it was very early days, and it was more talking about sequences, action sequences, and what could the sequences be, and what would the airplane sequence be, and what would, various things in our drafts. And I don't even remember what, but the conversation was mostly like a get to know you, and then his initial thoughts, but they were kind of focused on action sequences and images he had in his head. And I think I couldn't tell you what the notes were unless they're in the margins in those drafts, but I remember him giving thoughts on images or things to add to the action sequences that we then did going forward. But I don't recall much about story or character. Again, he didn't have a translator with him, and he could listen in English and he could kind of talk to you in English, but he couldn't. It was difficult. It was kind of a difficult thing. So he couldn't really give us very detailed notes, and the conversations weren't that in depth.
So when you saw the final movie, like what did you think, and how much of your sort of work was up there when you saw it?
I was pleased. I thought that the general structure and story was what we had worked on, and so I felt like the final credit I thought was accurate. We had done the story, and Town had really done the screenplay, because I don't know if there's many of our lines or dialogue that's left over. I really don't remember, but I remember watching and going, yeah, that's cool. I'm part of that. We actually did kind of craft that, and we broke the basic structure and who the characters are and what the central MacGuffin was going to be about.
Did you go to the premiere? We're very obsessed with how insane these Mission Impossible premieres are, and it seemed like 2 was properly insane. Did you go to the premiere?
It was big. It was a big premiere in Hollywood. They had a whole thing. They had motorcycles around that you could sit on, and music and lights and smoke machines, and it was kind of what you kind of want a Hollywood premiere with Tom Cruise to be. It was that.
Was that the one that had the rock climbing too?
Yeah, it had the rock climbing thing. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't do it, but it was there.
Did you have any like later interactions with Tom where he thanked you for your work or anything like that? I mean, was there
I
any
think he
sort
did. I
of
think we
like
saw it. Well, I think we did get 5 minutes with him in the premiere, and he was very gracious and thanked us for our work. And I saw him a couple of times in subsequent years in other contexts, and once just as a I don't remember why, but I came over to his offices, and we just had to sit down and to catch up and kind of check in what I was doing. And he's just, he's a lovely man. I mean, he's very personable. He's very friendly. He likes to laugh. He has a great sense of humor. He's smart. I mean, he's, you're very at home when you're in his presence and hanging out with him. He's easy to hang out with. Brandon and I, he would wear like, sports jerseys and talk sports, and we'd be busting balls, and lunch would come in, and somebody would bring in lunch, and it'd be a tuna sandwich, and Tom would pick it apart and look at it. What is this? Is this peanut in my tuna? And they would laugh, and he would laugh back, because he was clearly some inside joke about whatever his tuna was. And it was fun. I mean, I really enjoyed those days. It was once I was there a little early for a meeting. And so I was in this, like I said, it was the living room, and then you realize it was a screening room, because one whole wall would go up and reveal the screen. But there were a bank of windows on the left. So I got there early, and I was just hanging out, and I looked out into the backyard, and there was Tom with his kids, and he had these like custom built little pedal bike things that were like little kid tricycles, but they were shaped like aircraft. Like one was like a P-51 Mustang, and there was another one that was like a biplane or something. And his kids were pedaling them around, and Tom was out there with them, and he was like so into it. And he was with these little kids. He's like, okay, you're Whiskey Tango 5, and you're on the runway, so you have to call into the control tower. Now you have to wait for permission before. And these kids were like wrapped, and they're like pedaling their airplanes to take off. And he was it was just so charming. It was just such a lovely parent thing with his kids, and he was totally like engaged with those kids and playing with them in the backyard. And I'll never forget that. It was just like I got this little bit of a window into sort of, his personal life. And it was very sweet.
well, was there any talk of you coming back for another installment in the series, or was this sort of a one and done
No, that was it.
scenario?
That was the only thing. We never, they didn't reach out to us on the subsequent ones, but it was a ball while it lasted.
Right.
What's the process like between you and your writing partner, Brandon Braga? Like, do you sit together when you work, or do you toss scenes back and forth to each other?
I think what we did is we pretty much wrote together. Like one of us would be at the computer, the other one would pace and talk, and then we would kind of switch. I mean, probably I did more pacing and talking, and he did more writing if you really added it up. But we both kind of did both things. So you would just do it a scene at a time, and we would just write, in chronological order, linearly through the script, and we just fade in, and it's this setting, and we would both go back and forth, and then I'd look at the computer and see what he had written. Then we'd move on to the next scene, and it was very much, and it was very intense. It was a very intensive experience, because you're with them all day for hours and hours upon end, and yeah, that's how we wrote.
Do you normally use outlines or note cards, or what's your process like?
I think we would go back to our Star Trek offices, and we had white dry erase boards, and we would like sketch some ideas down on the white dry erase board, and then write it up on an outline and take it to Tom. And then as we kind of progressed, we stopped using the erase boards, and it was pretty much we just had the laptop. It was a very one of the crude early laptops that we had, and we kind of worked on that quite a bit. And Brandon would take notes with Tom on his laptop or by hand, and then we would kind of go back and we rework those outlines, and then bring them back, print them up, bring them back to Tom, and just keep going back and forth like that.
When you write, what do you prefer to do as your process? I mean, do you like outlines? Do you like note cards? I mean, just in general.
Well, generally, in television, I like working with cards on a board. In a room, you do a break, and we use the best system I found is there's now a white dry erase board that has these magnetic cards. They're like strips of vinyl, and you can get them in different sizes. And so you can write them like traditional note cards and slap them up on the board. And it's a lot easier than dealing with the push pins of it all. And then you can erase and readjust the cards instead of having to rewrite the whole note card. and it's not quite as messy as just having a white dry erase board. So that's like the best system I've found so far.
And you said before you prefer television to movie writing. Can you talk about the differences between the two, or why you prefer TV and everything?
Well, as a writer, in TV, the cliche is in TV the writer is king, and in features the director is king, and there's a lot of truth in that. In a feature film, the director really is the author of the film in a lot of ways, and he or she is going to make all the key decisions, and they're pretty much in charge. The writer starts the process, and typically the writers come and go. They'll bring in another writer to do the comedy pass, and then they'll do a writer to do the action pass, and then do a writer who's just going to do work on this one character, and they just, there's just a line of them. In television, the power structure is just exactly the opposite, because the showrunner of a series is almost always the head writer, and you're there. So you're doing, 10, 20 episodes a year, and the head writer, the showrunner, is really guiding what the show is. And I'm through production, and I'm in post-production and editorial and all that. And the directors come and go. The director comes in, does an episode, and then leaves. And then I have another director do the second one, and so on. So as a writer, it's just much more fulfilling and more creative to like have your hands on the project from the beginning to end and actually deliver the entire show, instead of just coming in to do one little pass and then getting kicked away in the feature world.
Are you able to get on set as showrunner while they're shooting?
Oh yeah, I mean, in
Yeah.
shooting, the showrunner is literally the boss of the entire show. So it's my set,
Right.
and then the directors are guests. Like you invite these guests to come into your house and direct an episode, and you give them their respect, and you make sure that I don't interfere in how they direct. But if I see that there's a problem or they're not getting a story point, I'll pull them aside and say, no, this is what the show is, and we don't do that kind of shot, or you've missed this story point or whatever. 9 times out of 10, you don't even have to do that. They watch the show and they get familiar with what you're trying to do. But as the showrunner, it's really my show, and then I'm inviting directors in, to do specific episodes.
I assume that puts, on the pilot then in particular, you must be very involved in making sure that the director does exactly what he or she needs to be doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, the director on a pilot has a very important role, because it's setting the visual language and the emotional tone for everything. So at that point, it's definitely it's an intensive conversation he or she and I are having, all the way through the process, because whatever they put to film in that first episode is really going to define, in large part, where the show is going.
Right.
Is it harder to work on something like you've been involved with these huge franchises like Mission Impossible and Star Trek, obviously. Is it harder or easier to sort of get ideas through when you're part of this machine, as opposed to an original idea that you have come up with?
It depends. There's a lot of pros and cons to each one. With the bigger the franchise, obviously, the bigger the stakes. And the more eyes are going to be on it, because the franchise means it's a franchise. It means something to the studio. But it's almost always they're willing to spend more money on it. They're a little more. They feel a little bit more secure, because they know that there's an audience for it. There's a recognizable name. There's people that they know will like this. They feel more secure that they're not just throwing their money away. On an original, you don't have as many layers to go through, and you are the only one who knows what it's supposed to be, and they have to trust your vision of it a little bit more. It's not like they have opinions on it yet, because you're just creating it out of thin air. But then they get nervous about, will people like this? Shouldn't it be more like this other franchise that we're aware of? And who are the fans going to be? And who's the audience? And so it's really, you can kind of argue it either way. They both have their graces, and they both have their trials.
Well, you worked on this fabled live action Star Wars show years ago, right? Do you remember what that was and what you were kind of contributing? Because we would hear these things like, there are 100 episodes written, and it's like, what the hell is going on? I mean,
That was great. It was a fantastic. That was another great experience. Went up to Skywalker Ranch periodically. It was an international group of writers that George put together, and we would gather up there periodically, like every 6 to 8 weeks or something. We'd spend a few days with him, breaking stories, sending writers off, and then regather in 6 to 8 weeks, bring in drafts. George would have read them, give notes, break the next section, write another group. And, not every writer went to every session. Like I wasn't there at the very first one, and I missed a couple subsequent, and the other writers kind of came in and out as well. So there was never like a continuous set group but it was a ball. It was fun. It was really like, this is crazy. I'm sitting here with George Lucas, and we're arguing about Star Wars. It's kind of fun.
What was the storyline, like, loosely? Do you
It was
remember
basic. It
where?
was called Star Wars Underworld, and it was generally speaking going to be sort of a Sopranos. It was about the criminal underworld. It was the setting, within the Star Wars universe. So it wasn't going to be any. It wasn't going to have really anything to do with the rebellion or the Empire, except that those were things that were happening out there in the great beyond. But that wasn't really the focus of the show. So it was really going to be a different series within the Star Wars franchise, which was part of the excitement of doing it. And like, we thought, well, this is going to be a ball because it's really not like the rest of what Star Wars was at that point.
Right. Wow.
What year was this, and when was it going to take place in the Star Wars universe?
It was around, well, I know it was around the time I was doing Caprica, or just getting Caprica going. So that would have been like 2009, I want to say, 2008, 2009, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah. And then where would it take place in the
Oh,
Star Wars
my memory, it
timeline?
was, God, where was it? Well, Darth Vader was in one of them, so he was Darth Vader, so it was post Sith. I think it was somewhere. I think it might have been between 3 and 4, maybe somewhere in there.
Hmm.
Again, it didn't really reference. I think that's what we said internally. It was in that sort of range.
But it wasn't really revisiting a lot of the other
It
characters.
didn't
It was like
really.
a new
Darth
thing.
Vader made an appearance in one episode. I got to write dialogue for him, which was a kick. But that was
Oh,
really
that's
that was
awesome.
the only. No, nobody else did.
Charles, should we ask the big questions here?
Well, but wait, before we do, hold on. So I wanted to ask about the Star Trek Generations, and just at did you feel a lot of pressure bringing those characters together, from both the TV show and the movies?
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult. That was our first feature assignment, and we were thrilled to get it. And then it was very difficult because it kind of came with this laundry list of things that had to be in the movie that the studio, wanted in the film. They wanted it to be a Picard story. They wanted a funny Data B story. They wanted Klingons in it. They wanted a villain that was as big and great as Khan. They wanted the original cast in it just at the beginning for only 10 to 15 minutes at most. And then Kirk alone could appear in the second part, and they didn't really want it to be a time travel story. So you had all this whole like, okay, how do we construct a plot and a story out of all this? So it was we learned a lot, and it was a difficult process, to say the least.
I mean, how did it feel to come back and then do First Contact, to write that
Oh,
movie?
much better. I mean, First Contact was it was fun. It was a more pleasurable experience. We had learned a lot. There wasn't a big laundry list of things that had to be in the movie, so we really could just kind of start fresh. And it was just a different spirit on it, and everyone just had a good time. You had a feeling like it was just going to be a better film.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to ask before we get to the big questions, Drew?
I'm just dying. I'm dying for this to ask these huge questions. So we asked this of everyone, and as a man with a very impressive head of hair, I think that you will latch onto this. But we want to know, what are your favorite Tom Cruise hairstyles from the Mission Impossible franchise? Maybe ranked favorite to least favorite to favorite.
Oh, I couldn't.
Because
I'm
he
not.
kind of
God, I'd have to see them to even like
well.
draw them up in
Here's a
my
question for you:
brain.
did well, did Tom talk to you about wanting long hair in this, like
No,
his character? No, okay.
no. Yeah, I couldn't. Now that you say that, I'm not even sure I know the differences between his hair. I know there was longer in one and shorter, and I think I liked his look in the first film. I thought he looked pretty good.
Yeah, we love that too. That was when he was really short. That was almost a buzz.
Yeah, that was really short. It gave him a very G-man government agent kind of feel to him.
Right, like he had like just graduated,
Yeah,
just gotten out of the military or something. Have you watched all the Mission Impossible movies since?
I think I have. Yeah, I think I have watched them all. Yeah.
Well, here's your next question: is could you rank the Mission Impossible movies from maybe your favorite to least favorite?
Um, I think my favorite still remains probably the first one. Just had a great spirit and fun, and to me, it was the closest to the original in that there was a whole team, and seeing the team function was, to me, defined what Mission Impossible was. And then as the series went on, I just got further and further away from the team concept. I think the last one was pretty good. Is the last one Ghost Protocol?
Last one was Fallout.
Fallout.
That was him on the helicopter.
Yeah, that was good. And Ghost Protocol, I thought the last two, I think I enjoyed. I didn't like the Seymour Philip Hoffman one. I know that.
Oh, okay, that was 3. That was the one after yours.
Did not get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very polarizing entry in the franchise. Yeah, people either love it or they don't really care for it.
Yeah, I felt like it didn't. It felt like it was outside the realm of even what Mission Impossible was supposed to be. It just felt like it felt more generic action flick than it really was anything to do with Mission Impossible.
Right.
Well, we're just days away now from the 20th anniversary of MI2. Are there any global thoughts you have about looking back on the project?
It was just fun. I mean, it was the first interaction with a superstar, in my career, Tom, and Brand and I were very young, and it was just such a thrill to do it. And we just really enjoyed hanging out with him and hearing his stories when he would come back from things. Like there was some event in New York where Time Magazine brought together all the people, or as many people as they could, who had been on the cover of Time Magazine. So he had been on cover, so he's there. And he was at some table with like Kissinger and all these people. And then he got introduced to Dr. Kevorkian. And Kevorkian came over and said hi and shook his hand. And Tom says, so Kevorkian looks at me and he goes, "So, how you feeling?" And Tom goes, "Fine." And Kevorkian goes, "Damn." It laid Tom out. He laughed so hard even in the retelling of it. It was a funny story. It's like the guy Dr. Kevorkian had a sense of humor. It was just like a hysterical moment. It was such a weird reality of Tom Cruise and meeting Dr. Kevorkian while Henry Kissinger is like having coffee or something.
That's amazing.
Was that your last question, Charles?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's a pleasure to have you on here on the show.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ron. We'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Thanks a lot.
Well, that was awesome. Getting to talk to him was a huge thrill and great insight into the making of that crazy movie. I thought there were going to be crazier stories, quite frankly, but it's just sort of a peek behind the scenes of what a major Hollywood movie takes to get made, and it was really interesting, I thought.
I feel like it might have been crazier if he was more involved in the production, and hopefully someday we'll be able to get Robert Towne on the show to talk about that and talk about the first movie as well, since he was a writer on the first movie. But yeah, I mean, it's very much a peek at the development. I loved hearing about him going over to Tom Cruise's house every day and developing the story for 2 months. I thought that was so cool.
Everyone that works with Tom Cruise, that's always their favorite part of making the movie, is going on over to his house and shooting the shit with him for hours on end.
Yeah.
I'm very jealous he got to go to the premiere, which sounded amazing.
Of course. We're going to get to one of those premieres someday.
If we're not at 7, we really have burned some bridges in the next year and a half. I'll say that.
I think at the very least we'll be recording from around the corner, just in the crowd of people, just like trying to scream out and see if we can get anybody's attention.
Right. Can't wait.
Yeah.
But I will say that one of the perks of the 100th episode is that we got so many new Patreon followers, and we got so many new, our IMF rankings are really filling up. So
yes,
do we have anybody new to thank this week?
Not yet, not till next month. But we can thank Jacob from Holland, who we love so much, who's been around with us for a long time now, and of course, as always, this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon. And if you're interested in joining our Patreon, we have so many great episodes on there. We got bonus episodes. We have a very special interview we did with Mo Shafiq about the vinyl release of MI2. So if you want to hear an exclusive interview with Mo, we've had him on the show a couple times before. We haven't recorded this interview yet, so I don't know what we're going to get out of him, but I'm pretty sure it will be some information about the forthcoming soundtracks after MI2 as well, I'm hoping. So that'll be out by now. And so for all our Patreon subscribers, you can listen to that. And if not, you should join, because we're also going to do, today is the 25th anniversary. The day that we're recording this is the 25th anniversary of Die Hard with a Vengeance. We're going to do an episode about that movie that we love so much. We're going to record that next week. We've done commentaries for all the movies. I mean, you've heard us, we recap this every week. So we've done a lot of awesome episodes for the Patreon, and we really think you should check it out. And we have a lot of tiers. You can do a Skype chat with us if you pay a little bit more. We do a Skype chat once a month, and we keep everybody involved with what we have coming up in the future with interviews, and we ask people suggestions, and just, we build a rapport with our followers there, which is a lot of fun. So that's patreon.com/lightthefuse. And if you're not feeling the Patreon, you can always buy a shirt, or we have masks now at the TeePublic store, or a mug or a sticker or magnet pin. That's linked from our website, which is lightthefusepodcast.com. And what else do we have, Drew?
Well, you know what we really need right now is just communication. And in the communication of telling people how much you love this podcast, how you listen to it, and how much you love the both of us. Now, I know that podcasting listenership is down right now because nobody's going to work. But we have got such great listeners and fans and followers that seem very engaged, very up to the minute. And we really love that, and we really appreciate that. And if you love the show, just tell people about it. You're on that Zoom call with mom and dad, just tell them what's up. Tell them how much you're digging the show. And that would be great.
I didn't realize that the listenership was down overall, because ours, thankfully, because of our 100th and all this great stuff we've been doing lately, we've been growing our listenership recently.
Yeah. Industry-wide, it's down, but you know what? We like to buck those trends and just, strike out on our own. So
yeah,
that's us.
And if you can, write us a review too. That always helps. If you're listening on Apple or Stitcher or SoundCloud, wherever, write comments, spread the word, tell your friends, let people know on Facebook, whatever. Yeah, just anything you can do to spread the word always helps. So thank you very much. And we'll be back next week and the week after with more I-2 20th anniversary stuff. Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.